So let's talk about what is arguably the best list in Warhammer 40K right now, the winner of the single biggest tournament in the world, the Las Vegas Open. Hello and welcome back to Auspex Tactics, where today we're talking over one very strong army list in Warhammer 40K, the one that Mr. Richard Siegler has just used to win the Las Vegas Open, the biggest and most prestigious 40K tournament in the entire world. To be honest, it really is getting ridiculous just how many big events this guy has taken, every single one of Games Workshop's in-house tournaments, followed by winning the LVO, and also, I believe, being the top 40k player in the ITC's ranking system. There's pretty much nothing that says I've won all the Warhammers more than that. What makes me really quite happy though was that the list being used isn't exactly one of the ones that's going round for being one of the top meta ones at the moment. It seems that Mr. Siegler has fallen back to use his Adeptus Mechanicus that he used in previous events, an army that was just ridiculously overpowered when the codex dropped, a whole ton of units that were just plain undercosted for what they did, but following successive rounds of nerfs from Games Workshop, now I'd say are a much more mid-tier army than a top-tier one. In general, their win percentage at the LVO wasn't all that high, I believe it was sub 50%, far below things like Custodes, Genestealer Cult, Drukhari or Grey Knights, and it makes this big win all the more interesting to talk about. I personally feel that Admech have kind of transitioned from being a really easy army to play that almost anyone could get great results with, to being one of the armies that does have a crazy amount of power with the right combinations and buffs going off, but actually is a fair bit harder to use. If the units get played wrong, then they really can fold quite easily, and aren't as easy to just unintelligently blow away the entire enemy force without really thinking about positioning, movement or combat. I would say that this one's a testament to player skill, just as much as it is to tailoring a list for the current meta. In any case though, let's take a look at what was played, and talk through some of the choices and how they work. So here we have the 2000 point LVO winning Admech list that smashed through a crazy amount of competitive lists, taking out Adeptus Custodes in the final. The army is built around a single battalion, and it comes from the Forge World Mars. They're the ones that are pretty handy for the Skitarii units, allowing them a single reroll to hit, a small damage boost there, but more importantly allowing the Skitarii units Canticles of the Omnissiah, stacking things like cover or decent damage boosts on top of the already very good Doctrina imperatives. Mars also has that excellent Wrath of Mars stratagem as well, one command point to use on most normal sized units, and it gives you any wound roll of a 6 inflicting 1 mortal wound on your target. A pretty cheap way of handing out around 6 mortal wounds, particularly on the Rangers. The list is also making use of the Skitarii Veteran Cohort Army of Renown formation. That's the one that gives you a bit of a different twist on your Skitarii troops. They all get 2 attacks and a 5+ invul save rather than a 6+. They do cost an extra couple of points per model for the privilege. It also gives you access to a Warlord trait and relic which were both used here, and some very powerful stratagems to apply to the Rangers or the Ruststalkers. Some ways to get boosted defense, offense, and advance and charge. The army is led by a trio of buffing characters, 2 Skitarii Marshals and the Tech Priest Manipulus. The first Marshal takes the Relic and Warlord trait from the formation. The Cantic Thrownet is just massively powerful Doctrina manipulation. It allows you to change to a different Doctrina imperative, basically a massively powerful buff of your choice to a unit. +1 to save, better weapon skill or ballistic skill, or even better movement, all could be handy. The Warlord trait is Calculate without diversion, and that's quite a nice command point saving one. Basically you get to use the powerful stratagems from the Veteran Cohort at 1 command point less than normal when your arm is in the appropriate Doctrina imperative. To make a net profit on buying it in, you only need to use 2 of them in the appropriate phases, so it isn't the hardest to make work. The next Skitarii Marshal is a pretty excellent one for buffing the Rangers. He takes the Exemplar's Eternity, so he allows core units to reroll 1s to hit and wound, a pretty decent damage boost on all those massive Galvanic Carbine damage outputs, and he also pairs very well with them with Programmed Retreat, that allows them to fall back and still shoot, so they're not just going to get locked up by a pesky vehicle tagging them or something. The Tech Priest Manipulus kind of doubles down on this, maybe could be used for buffing the other big unit of Rangers. The Logi Holy Order allows a unit to ignore AP-1 and AP-2, a nice defensive buff on these medium save infantry. He'll innately be able to give you extra range and extra AP on their guns, and he also takes the Raiment of the Technomartyr, another ability to allow you to fall back and still shoot, as well as give the Tech Priest himself a quite nice Feel No Pain save. The Marshal and the Tech Priest can buff the 2 big squads of Veteran Rangers. There's 2 squads of 19 of them, quite expensive units, but they can have some seriously decent damage 1 firepower when buffed up, 38 shots each worth of anti-infantry firepower, maybe more if you use their stratagem, and some mortal wounds if you use Wrath of Mars. One of them takes the 5-point telemetry cache trait. That's a really nice defensive one, giving you light cover when you're shot, and if you happen to have some models in light cover already, then it gives you +1 to the save on those. Makes them just ridiculously hard to shift if they are in combination with that Tech Priest for ignoring AP -1 and 2, and you could also potentially stack Bulwark Doctrine on top of that, meaning that you really struggle to remove them from a key objective at range. That will certainly help you scoring some primaries. We then have 2 small units of Veteran Vanguard, pretty decent little squads for objectives and actions. They can advance a little bit further than normal with the Veteran cohort, and can actually skirmish quite well against other infantry of their class. The Radium Carbines and the Rad Saturation help them out against other Toughness 3 infantry. Moving on into the elite slot, we then have really quite a lot of Sicarians, the 2 wound infantry chaps who fight pretty hard in combat. There's 5 infiltrators with stub carbines. They allow some forward deployment if needed and allow you to screen one part of the board. And then there's some seriously nasty melee damage and 3 really hefty units of Rust Stalkers, all of them armed with the transionic blades. These guys really aren't a bad choice in the current meta, I think. They have the potential for enormous amounts of high AP damage 1 attacks, backed up by a hefty dose of mortal wounds for every 6 that they get on the wound roll, and there's really quite a lot of ways to buff them with stratagems, multiple ways to get +1 attack, advance and charge as we mentioned from the veteran cohort, and even +1 strength if they need it. They're also quite fast if they need it, and are kind of annoying to shift as well, only a 4+ save base, but they do innately get +1 to their saves whenever they're receiving the benefit of cover. With their good movement, they're a really quite decent unit to be just popping out of terrain and deleting something nasty. Definitely a pricey unit that you need to play carefully with at their current points cost, but there's few things in the game that won't be scared of them if they take a few stratagem buffs. Even above that, the big squad takes the Tempercopia to make one enemy unit fight last. They're pretty hard to charge that way. And one of the slightly smaller units takes the Omniscient Mask. That one gives you exploding 6s to hit, just for a little bit more melee damage. Finally, to round off the army, there are 3 Iron Striders with las cannons. Not exactly an enormous amount of these, but they're still ridiculously efficient in Mars. All of them getting a hit reroll will keep them really accurate, and one of the canticles will allow wound rerolls as well. Could certainly be enough to put the hurt on one single important enemy vehicle, as well as being quite a quick unit for getting around and doing objectives and things. Finally, there's a little bit of Ignores line of sight firepower, 2 Scorpius Disintegrators with Belarus energy cannons, good for 63 2 damage attacks at the enemy of your choice, pretty good for engaging enemy units that the rest of the army can't reach very well. Overall, I think it still might be the sort of army that isn't necessarily the easiest to command, but in the hands of someone who really knows each unit and their capabilities could be seriously terrifying to face. There's a lot of threats and utility that's just hard to ignore, and units that seem kind of easy to take out, but at the same time will be really quite annoying if a lot of your army can't reach them or see them. They've got enough muscle and durability to contest the midboard, and enough scattered units to do things like action and retrieving data, all while dealing out a serious amount of damage. Overall, I think it's really quite a fun army list to have won the LVO. Fairly complicated with a sheer amount of layered buffs, warlord traits, relics and options, and using a reasonably diverse amount of datasheets within the codex, even if there's a fairly hefty presence of rangers and rust stalkers. So anyway, I'm sure that Mr. Siegler's success will encourage at least a few more people to take a second look at Admech as a really strong army. I'll be interested to hear what you guys have to say down in the comments. I honestly wouldn't have seen Admech taking the LVO over things like Drakari, Custodes, Genestealer Cults, Tyranids or Grey Knights. If you've enjoyed the video, feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics, where I do generally try and keep up with the 40k game and news as it comes out. Finally, if you have been enjoying all the videos on the channel, I would just like to mention that Auspex Tactics does have a Patreon page, and you can find it down in the video description below. Channel patrons do get a fair few advantages, seeing certain videos early, regular votes to see what sort of things happen next on the channel, and automatic entry into the regular prize giveaways with a chance to win some big model kits each month. If any of that sounds good to you, or you'd just like to help support, then the link is down in the video description. In any case, a massive thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.